let's get some perspective on this story. We're joined live now by Jeffrey Rosen, president of the National Constitution Center and a professor at George Washington University Law School. Jeffrey, thank you so much for being with us. I mean, for our international viewers who are watching this show from around the world, just give us a bit more context on the origins of this particular case, because as I mentioned, it centers around a woman named Rebecca Slaughter, who the Trump administration fired from her position as a Democratic member of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and essentially told her that her priorities were different from or inconsistent with the administration's priorities. She was fired and then she sued. Walk us through it, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. So the broader context is this is a debate about whether Congress can create an independent civil service. Can it create agencies that are independent of the president and that he can't fire just because he doesn't like them? It's a debate that goes back to the progressive era at the turn of the 20th century, when Congress established a series of independent agencies: the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Communication Commission, and most significantly, the Federal Reserve, and said that their heads couldn't be fired by the president except for cause. In 1935, the US Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of independent agencies. And today, the court seems likely to overturn that decision and say that the president can fire any official that he appoints. If it does reach that decision, it'll transform the nature of civil service protections in America. It'll open the door for President Trump to fire lower level appointees because he doesn't like their politics. And it will represent a transformation in the understanding of the administrative state that has prevailed since the progressive era.
I mean, obviously the consequences are vast, but I do want to get at specifically what the Trump administration is arguing here, because obviously she's saying that she was fired without cause. The Trump administration is arguing that this sort of spirit of bipartisanship that exists in a lot of agencies, especially the FTC, is unconstitutional because the president should have full authority over government bodies like, for example, the FTC, so that he could essentially enforce laws and regulation, etc. Walk us through what you make of that particular argument and just give us more context as to what the Trump administration is arguing here.
Absolutely. As you say, it's a fundamental argument about the meaning of the Constitution. And the Trump administration argues that the president has what's called unitary executive authority. In other words, the Constitution vests all executive power in the president. And the Trump administration says that means that the president has the ability to completely control and even to fire any officials that he appoints. They make an argument about the original understanding of the Constitution. They say that in 1789, James Madison and other founders created departments like the Treasury and the State Department and gave the president total power to fire all of its officials. And in that sense, they're saying that the whole constitutional understanding that allowed independent agencies is a violation of this core unitary executive power. There's a big debate about the history. In the oral arguments today, people on the other side said, well, at the time of the founding, Congress created independent agencies like Alexander Hamilton's sinking fund to administer the debt, and that it's not true that the founders meant to prevent the president from being constrained by Congress. But that's the core of the debate. It has to do with the essence of the meaning of executive power, and the Trump administration is taking a very broad reading that may, in fact, and is likely to be embraced by the US Supreme Court.
And I think also one of the other things that's at stake is this idea of policy continuity, because if the president can sort of fire people at will, and if there's no sort of spirit of bipartisanship at some of these agencies, including the FTC, then the direction of some of these agencies would change dramatically depending on who's in the Oval Office. And so what does that mean for policy continuity when one administration takes over from the next?
That's exactly right. And this debate about policy continuity goes back to the establishment of a civil service. It began right after the founding era. And then Andrew Jackson came in and instituted something called the spoils system that allows the president to fire all of his predecessors' appointees. Recoiling against the spoils system, Congress in the 19th century created civil service protections to ensure policy continuity, including something called the Pendleton Act. And that tradition of a nonpartisan civil service to ensure policy continuity has prevailed since the 19th century. And that's why the stakes are so big. If the US Supreme Court buys President Trump's constitutional argument, that policy continuity won't be possible, and every president will basically be able to clean house and institute his loyalists to carry out his vision.
All right, Jeffrey Rosen, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.